The King of the Battlefield. Chapter 221, Omen of the Ruin, 3. Translator, Nadu. Editor, Sefter, Area. The dwarves carried a huge box. A huge box that seemed ordinary on the outside. However, Muyong was able to sense an overflowing amount of magical power. The dwarves then laid down the box in front of Muyong. Due to the devil's recent movements, it seems like Bartas is unable to move. Instead, he created the equipment with the supplied materials. Well, Bartas was the king of dwarves. He had an obligation to be responsible for his own kingdom. As Muyong just wanted the equipment from the beginning and not Bartas, he didn't care. The immortal king's power. Muyong's best equipment was anguish, and the next best was the immortal king's breastplate. If he could wear the rest of the immortal king's equipment, he would be able to fight face to face with Enrith. The box in front of him felt as if some kind of power was oozing out of it. However, it felt ominous. If anguish was a force that denied everything, the power from the box felt like it could activate a certain special effect on a particular individual. Even Muyong was stirred up by such strange sensations. As if Kalmo had noticed, he spoke bitterly. The item is beyond amazing. Even Bartas couldn't believe it himself. I only saw it for a moment, but even I was totally awed by the finished equipment. But the magical power of the equipment attracts monsters, and make them ferocious. Indeed. Kalmo appeared quite tired. It seemed like the path back wasn't as smooth as he had expected. However, to those who had intelligence, it didn't have a great effect. The influence was concentrated on the monsters that didn't have intelligence and were faithful to their instincts. Muyong touched the box. Then, as he opened the huge box, he was able to see something that looked like scales. Scales that were very transparent. It was lacking to be called a piece of equipment. No, it wasn't even a piece of equipment. What is this? As Muyong asked, Kalmo replied. It's a skin. Skin. Bartas said that by combining the leather of moonlight and the immortal king's strength, that sort of form was created. As the moon represents eternity and immortality means endlessness. Bartas said that for a perishable entity to fully contain that sort of strength, it needs this sort of skin. Even Bartas doesn't completely know. Bartas was definitely the one who created this. However, even Bartas didn't seem to know what he had really created. He also said, the true god of the great blacksmith had possessed me. Did it mean Bartas created this while he was being possessed? Muyong grinned. It was no different than drunken truth. Then, he turned his head and looked at the scales once more. Unless he concentrated on it, it was so transparent that he couldn't tell if the scales existed or not. As Muyong held it and focused on it, a message popped up. Name, Eternity. Rank. Classification. Endurance. Effect. However, there wasn't much information. Besides the name, he couldn't confirm anything. It meant that he needed to wear it for him to really know its capabilities. Eternity. Eternity. A word that means endlessness. A skin that draws monsters and makes them ferocious. The equipment wouldn't just cover your skin. It existed to transform its accepted user. He was able to feel that kind of obsession. Among the things that are considered as tools, people said that the ones that transform the user contain evil. In that sense, this skin didn't bring a positive effect. However, it was the skin that contained Immortal King's strength. If the breastplate he forcefully created was S and rank, he was unsure how much power this skin would exhibit. Additionally, tools are just tools. Tools couldn't affect him adversely. Tools exist to be used. The moment someone places too much meaning in a tool, the tool no longer exists as just a tool and consumes the user. Muyong started to take off all his clothing. The scale skin was bigger than Muyong's body, but when he wore it, the skin shrank to fit him. New skin. Zap. Every spot where it touched his skin, it felt sticky, like static cling. Before long, the existing skin was dyed red and necrotized. And in that place, a new skin was formed. It had killed what normally existed and it took its place. The skin that was called Eternity was transplanted to Muyong. It didn't feel different at all. It felt like it was his natural skin. However, such a natural sensation was only momentary. Muyong frowned. Rejection. The skin and body that had maintained their balance for a while became out of sync. All his muscles felt twisted. It even influenced his bones and organs. He felt woozy. It has been a while since he felt this sort of pain. As he clenched his teeth, his eyeballs felt like they were going to pop out. His body twisted as he supported himself on the chair. Lord! Are you okay? Get out! As Muyong gestured, Kalmu swallowed his saliva and nodded. Muyong realized that it was a problem he needed to deal with on his own. Unless I call, don't let anyone in. After Muyong spoke, the door closed with a thump. In that state, Muyong collapsed and sat next to the chair. The whole body transformation was still continuing. The power of the Immortal King. This was all due to the strength of the Immortal King. Muyong was mortal. A human who was destined to die one day. However, immortals lived forever. Of course, the mortal and immortal couldn't exist simultaneously in the same being. It didn't make any sense to be able to use the skin with immortal power without any consequences. I could die. However, the price was too great. If it wasn't Muyong, 99/100 would have died from in the beginning stage. Muyong was able to endure it as he was familiar with pain. Eventually, Muyong shook his head. I will live. I will survive. I will live until the end. If he acquired the Immortal King's skin, he would be able to use acceleration more freely. Although Muyong was able to accelerate himself up to 64 times, he wasn't able to use it for long. There was a problem with the limitations of time, but mostly, it was because of his physical limits. With this, he could to overcome that limit. So, this amount of pain was nothing. I will overcome it. Winning, and winning were the only merits of Muyong's existence. Muyong vowed to win again this time. Gaudiamas. As Sungmin chanted a spell, doors were instantly created in his vicinity. As a door opened, hundreds of shackles would capture devils and blow them up. Boom! Also, the Hydra that was summoned from the third door had 9 heads, which used 9 different magics to mess with the devils. Devils are like bees. Sungmin compared devils to bees. Without the queen bee, the bees couldn't help but be confused. The devils only exist for the demon kings and demon gods, and so, Sungmin compared them with bees. The moment Demon King Roosevelt disappeared, the devils experienced extreme confusion. In the meantime, as Sungmin raided, they become greatly disorganized. At least, on this battlefield, the ruler was Sungmin. I need to quickly move after wrapping up the situation here. However, Sungmin was in a hurry. This battle wasn't all of it. The main army Enrith led hadn't even arrived yet. In order to fight against 1,000,000 demons, it was necessary to hasten things even by a little. Especially, the 2 demon kings were the biggest obstacles. Even if he had restricted Roosevelt, the demon king named Freda was still left. So Sungmin was trying to quickly end this battle, and then assist Takan and Augur. Crush the enemies. Sungmin swung his staff. Then, the earth gathered, and a few dozen golems appeared. By now, the devils knew who led this battle. That lich, kill him. If we kill the lich, it's our victory. They formed groups of hundreds of devils and started to approach Sungmin. Sungmin raised his staff and quickly spoke. Amadeus. Kai-a-a-a-a-a-a-a-ok. From the surroundings, a creepy scream could be heard. Even the devils couldn't help but cover their ears and shudder. Then, Sungmin twirled his staff and cut 5 of the Hydra's heads off. The neck that was cut would instantly regenerate, but a magical barrier was created. By making a sacrifice, he had completed the summoning. At that moment, a giant with messy hair appeared. A cyclops as big as the Hydra. As he looked down, blood flowed from his eye, and a red ray of light shot out. All devils who were touched by the ray disintegrated. What the hell? A monster of void. The devils were frantic. The void was a mysterious area, even for them. The monsters that emerged from that place were all strong and evil. The witch, Beatrice. The strongest monster Sungmin could summon wasn't a Hydra, but the witch, Beatrice. Sungmin wasn't just a simple lich. An elder lich. He, who was a lich king, could control the void. Let's quickly end this. Sungmin's mind had already left this battlefield. He was certain of his victory, and he was planning to move to help the other battle. Enrith was moving with his huge fortress. The fortress was Enrith's castle and a part of Enrith himself. In his surrounding, hundreds of thousands of devils flew in the sky and protected the fortress. Enrith, the advance teams have been attacked. Enrith sat on a huge throne in the middle of the fortress. As a devil bowed down as far as he could to show his respect and reported this, Enrith just nodded his head. I already know. Roosevelt has disappeared, and Freda has escaped with a few soldiers. I also am aware of this. Enrith had already seen everything. He was figuring out the enemy's tactics through the Demon King's fights. What should we do? The devils around him averted their gaze. The two Demon Kings have failed. The impossible had happened. The advance team. Although their numbers were small, as they were defeated even with the Demon Kings, Enrith wouldn't just quietly watch. After watching his crowd, Enrith slowly spoke. Send out Balrog. Instantly, the devil's eyes widened. Balrog. Isn't it too dangerous? Balrog was one of the monsters Enrith couldn't fully control. He was a strong ancient devil and a mad destroyer. Everywhere Balrog went, everything was shattered. Thus, the nickname given to Balrog was Omen of the Ruin. Simply by looking at the combat power, Balrog was stronger than the three Demon Kings. But, to send out Balrog? Just sending him out wasn't a problem. But in order to retrieve him, quite a lot of sacrifice would have to be made. The fact that Enrith mentioned Balrog nevertheless. I have not seen all of their cards yet. It was to fully grasp what his enemies were capable of. By sending out Balrog, they wouldn't have room to hold back. They would need to show all their cards, and in that process, they would show what they were hiding. Enrith was going to completely destroy his enemies. Chapter 222, Omen of the Ruin, 4. Translator, Nadu. Editor, Arya and Sefter. Enrith thought highly of his enemy, who was able to kill Sharshazar, and had defeated the devils. However, Enrith was also known as the Demon King of Blood and Iron. He was the strongest Demon King who was said to have no enemies. He wasn't so soft as to consider his enemy lightly. His enemies wouldn't be able to stand up against Balrog, but even if they did win against him, his enemies would never win. Show me. Enrith held his staff tightly. How long would they be able to resist? Like a child looking at an ant farm, Enrith's eyes were filled with curiosity. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Freda bit his lips. The unpredictable Demon King. Like the title, he was liable to make quite a few odd moves, but since he was a Demon King, no one could bother him about it. A Demon King. The words that represented the highest rank among the normal devils. Due to this, even if he was unpredictable, no one could treat him poorly. It wasn't strange for everything, including power and honor, to be placed on that title. While he possessed that title, Freda needed to be the strongest. It was because of this that he couldn't accept it. For me to lose. Clench. He clenched his jaws together. The first undead who appeared. Was his name Taken? There wasn't anything weird in fighting against him. He was a completely strong-headed warrior type undead. Although he was stronger than Freda had anticipated, he wasn't strong enough to defeat him. He pressured Taken and caused great damage to the surroundings. The problem was when the Lich appeared just as he was about to win. Elder Lich, wasn't there only one Elder Lich existing in this world? If the Demon King was the king of the devils, the Elder Lich was the king of the undead. Elder. Although the title was different, they were just as strong, or perhaps slightly stronger than the Demon Kings. However, there was only one Elder Lich in this world. The Lord of Death. He was one of the 4 transcendental beings that existed in different parts of the world and was the incarnation of death that even the devils avoided. But, he never left the ice-filled place known as the Mountain of Death. Then, was what Freda saw an illusion? Only the Elder Lich is able to control the void. But, he has much less magical power than the Lord of Death. Who is this Lich? The void that no one else could control. Even to the Demon Kings, the void was a somewhat unknown entity. Among the demon gods, there were some who were said to be capable of controlling the void, but compared to the Lord of Death, it was little more than a child's play. There couldn't be another Lich who could control the monsters of the void. However, he was definitely not the Lord of Death. Did he create an offspring? Crash! As he strongly stomped his foot on the ground, the surrounding greatly swayed. Liches couldn't have any offspring. It was the same for all the undead. This was common sense, but what he saw clashed with such common sense. It made less sense for him to be his disciple. As there was no way another being who was similar to the Elder Lich would have appeared. It took at least a few thousand years for a magician to become a Lich. Kleb. 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 Freda bit his nails. However, the fact that he lost hadn't changed. Because of this, he knew that he needed to retreat. His pride was hurt. He was trying to gain the favor of Enrith with his distinguished service, but he was now in a situation where it would lucky for him to not get killed. Roosevelt, where is Roosevelt and what is he doing? Only about 200 devils remained in the vicinity of Freda. Although he brought 10,000 devils, only 200 had survived. However, all the devils were silent. There was no way Freda wouldn't know what they knew. As it turned out like this, we will attack Roosevelt. I can't let him take all the credit. Freda had started to make unpredictable moves. He had no intention of letting someone else have what he couldn't. You mean that Roosevelt? This number of soldiers would be enough. The devils dissuaded him. Although they shared the same affiliation, there was no affection or fidelity between the devils. It was normal for them to backstab each other. It was their nature for them to prey upon those who were weaker than them. However, they were very small in number. As Roosevelt was a cold-hearted demon king, he would doubt Freda right away if he was to approach him. Slit. At that moment, Freda sliced the neck of the devil who was beside him. Thud. As one devil became a corpse, the crowd became silent. The veins in Freda's neck rose as he spoke. Returning empty-handed would also mean death. Roosevelt would kill him. Before I get attacked, I will attack first. Is this not obvious? The 10,000 troops who he brought to this place were Freda's own. As he had lost most, it was the same as Freda's fighting power has been drastically cut. And Roosevelt wouldn't just sit there and wait for Freda to attack him first and reverse the situation. The devils didn't try to stop him any longer as it somewhat made sense. That's right, then where is Roosevelt? Thud. It was at that moment. A black creature suddenly landed in front of him. He hadn't even seen it coming. It had fallen so fast that it escaped Freda's perception. It was a huge black monster possessing 4 pairs of wings. Balrog. 2 goat-like horns, a bulky figure, and his whole face was wrapped with flames like hellfire. Balrogs were strong devils who had existed since ancient times. Now, most of them had died off, and only a very few lived in the underworld. Due to their strong powers, demon gods caught them for themselves and controlled them. and Enrith had kept one Balrog. Using a very strong spell, he prevented it from moving around. Sometimes it was sent to a battlefield, but whenever it did, even the devils couldn't help but be terrified of the scene. Indiscriminately attacking both its enemies and allies. The Balrog was the top predator and the perfect destroyer. But, why was Balrog at this place? Grrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr There was no way Freda couldn't read its ill intentions. An evil gaze that only desired destruction. Stop him! He ordered the devils. The devils spread their wings, held their weapons and cast magic. Rumble. Crash. Numerous magic descended on Balrog's body. Thick smoke filled the area. It was an all-out attack. If they were to be directly hit by all the magic, none of them would be able to survive. However, crunch! Balrog moved within the smoke. When someone moves at a quick speed, the smoke should be disturbed, but the smoke not seeming to move at all, the Balrog was suddenly in front of the devils. Using its huge hands, the Balrog crushed the devils like they were toys. Whenever he opened his mouth wide, whatever was in front of it disappeared entirely, and when he flapped his wings, flesh was stripped off and scattered. Then, the Balrog stood in front of Freda. "How dare you show your teeth?" Freda frowned as he plucked one of his tails to create a spear. It was a magical spear that instantly killed whoever it pierced. This spear was part of Freda's body, as well as his strongest weapon. Thud. However, the magical spear couldn't penetrate the Balrog's skin. Was it because he used up so much strength on his previous fight? This can't be possible. When the magical spear didn't work, Freda's eyes quickly widened. However, Freda never thought that this would be the last thing that he would ever see. Crunch! The Balrog opened his mouth and swallowed the upper half of Freda's body. Crrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr However, as if he wasn't full, he smacked his lips and looked around. In the eyes of a predator, the devil's bodies became rigid. His skin had been necrotized and regenerated numerous times. He felt like he was repeatedly dying and coming back to life. Even when he was training rigorously as an assassin, he hadn't felt this much pain. He felt like his soul would become dust if there was even balance was even slightly off. The process of forcibly inserting an immortal being's power into a mortal. Of course, it wouldn't go smoothly. Give up. You cannot endure this pain. Someone spoke. Myung then realized the person who was speaking to him was Lucifer. Pass the authority to me. As I am also immortal, that power would no longer disrupt you. By giving Lucifer his authority, Myung could avoid the pain. Lucifer was tempting him. That everything would be solved if he just passed over the driver's seat. It wasn't completely incorrect. Lucifer didn't lie. He just cleverly coaxed him. However, Myung didn't reply. He just endured it. All Myung could do was clench his teeth and endure it. If you don't accept it, the pain will not end. The power of the immortal being will destroy you. If your soul and your body become damaged, I won't be safe as well. So, I will lend you my strength. If you pass your authority, I will free you from all this pain. Currently, Myung's soul and Lucifer's soul were mixed together. In this state, if something were to happen to Myung, Lucifer wouldn't be safe. That was correct. This was the truth. So, Lucifer couldn't help but be anxious. However, if Myung were to pass the authority over to him, would he pass it back to Myung? That would never happen. It was impossible to take back the authority once he gave it away. In the past, Myung hid his soul to counterattack him, but that method wouldn't work again. Crunch! 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 The body contracted, before expanding once again. Although Myung had experienced his tendons being cut, and his bones removing, separating, and mixing themselves into other parts of his body. This was completely different from those types of pain. Doesn't it hurt? Even though you are strong, there is always a limit to how much a mortal can endure. Since you are a living being, you cannot withstand the powers of an immortal being. Or, will you become an undead after you die? Like the lich you created? That won't be a bad idea. He spoke a lot. Lucifer wasn't normally a guy who chatted a lot like this. Lucifer probably realized that this was the best opportunity to take the authority away from Muyong. However, even so, Muyong felt something was off. Although his mind was weakened by the pain, Muyong did not miss this discrepancy. This was the first time Lucifer had been so desperate. That was when Muyong realized. Their souls were mixed together. If Muyong was weakened, Lucifer was also weakened. Up until now, Lucifer was protecting himself. He was protecting himself from Gabriel's strength, as well as all the other powers Muyong possessed. He shut the doors so that he couldn't be purified and he wouldn't lose himself. However, the door was now being forced open. As Muyong's soul became weakened, he was at the point where he could no longer defend himself. Gabriel's power wasn't being activated strongly, but if Muyong were to notice this, Lucifer knew that he could be swallowed up by him. Lucifer was certain that Muyong would never realize this truth. And if Muyong had been weakened slightly more, he truly might not have. That was why he was trying to weaken Muyong even further by tempting him. Pass over the driver's seat. I will try to neutralize the immortal being's strength. On my name, Lucifer. That's right. You were also immortal. Muyong stretched out his hand and grabbed Lucifer's soul. Chapter 223, Omen of the Ruin, 5. Translator, Nadu. Editor, Sefter and Area. Taken looked at the sword. The sword was broken into 2 pieces. It was what he received after being defeated by Freda. Even though Taken could repair it right away, he did not do so. It was to find the reason, as he thought again about his defeat. Didn't I get stronger? He thought he had become stronger. Indeed, he had defeated many strong men and proved his own power. However, it seemed like that was only comparable to the standards of humans. As much as Taken had gotten stronger, Muyong and Sungmin had improved even more. As Muyong was such a mysterious man, he felt that this could happen with him, but Sungmin was unexpected. Even Taken was thrilled by seeing how he had taken care of Roosevelt and even Freda. The numerous deaths that resulted through Sungmin's hands, and the monsters of the void. Freda was helpless in front of Sungmin. His devils could do nothing but let themselves be attacked helplessly. Taken had no choice but to feel the difference in their level in addition to Muyong. He felt like he was looking at a flower on top of a cliff. However much he reached out, he couldn't reach it. And with Sungmin, it was an especially great shock to Taken as he was originally weaker than him. When did he get that far ahead of me? What had happened in just 2 years? And for the last 2 years, what was Taken doing? The tables have turned. Even a few years ago, Sungmin was weaker than Taken. Perhaps he had been consumed by conceit. I'm strong, I've become stronger, and I will get stronger. Did he not put in too much thought because he thought it was so obvious? Taken left the territory. The territory was celebrating their victory for the moment. Either way, since they had stopped their enemy's advance team, there was a bit of time before the rest of their enemies arrived. He left the territory and entered deep into the woods. The fight isn't over yet. That was right. Nothing would change by reprimanding his actions. If Sungmin had gotten stronger, Taken just needed to get stronger as well. The war was the best stage on which to get stronger. Although they had taken care of the demon kings, Enrith still remained. There should be at least a few hundreds of thousands of devils under his command. Even having a celebration right now in the territory was to relieve the tension that people felt. Swoosh! Swoosh! However, Taken swung his broken sword. He was diligently swinging his sword so that he could reduce the gap while others were playing around. Certainly, I have been a bit lazy. He had slightly neglected his training once he felt he had gotten stronger. Through this fight and Sungmin's appearance, he realized it more dearly. Although he was one of the rulers of Ashura's path, he was lacking strength as a ruler. He needed to gain a bit more power to become a true ruler. At least until he defeated Sungmin and Weung, he couldn't be called a true ruler. As a ruler only existed to win and reign. Shuffle shuffle. He felt someone's presence. Taken stopped his swinging and carefully turned his body. They were skillful people, he would have missed their presence if it wasn't for the sound of wind and grass. Who are you? Was it the devils who had escaped? Freda had tried to escape with his subordinates. But if it was Freda and his devils who had appeared, it would be very welcoming. Then, their two people appeared. There were two of them, but they didn't look so good. An old man who had glaring eyes but a weary face, and a woman with messy hair and ragged clothing, were on a tree looking down at Taken. Teacher, it's a death knight. Can we eat it? Stop it. How can you eat a monster that's only bones? It seemed like the two were starving. Well, although it was a forest, there weren't a lot of living creatures. Even most of the plants were poisonous. If a human were to consume it carelessly, they would become sick. Why are humans in a place like this? Taken raised his sword. However, he was curious. The Sky Lord would never allow intruders into the demon god's territory. Unless they were humans who normally lived in this place, there was no way for them to pass the Sky Lord to enter this territory. The woman and the old man looked at Taken with astonishment. He seems like he is quite intelligent for a death knight. We can capture him and ask him all sorts of questions. Then, the two took a weird stance and leaped towards Taken. I don't know who you guys are, but don't think you will come out of this alive since you have attacked me. This was a good thing since he was feeling down at the moment. It would have been better if it was Freda and the devils, but he couldn't just let visitors who had no authorization trespass in this place. Taken swung his broken sword. Slash! The magical energy that soared out of the sword sliced through the air. As if they had made a prior arrangement, the woman and the old man separated simultaneously. It was to attack Taken from multiple sides. Quite good. They synchronized well. Additionally, their skills were also quite good. Among humans, he rarely saw people who could move the way they did. However, Taken had already fought with those who were considered to be the top 10. Thud. The woman and the old man weren't able to cause any damage to Taken. They continued to attack and defend at the same time. Although they were simple martial arts movements, their proficiency was like none other. And as they synchronized, they were able to exhibit more than their skills normally would allow them to. But, it still is not enough. Taken wasn't weak. Although he felt that when comparing himself to Weung and Sungmin, truthfully, Taken was strong enough. Taken wielded his sword. As the woman jumped low to avoid his attack, he twisted his body in a mysterious way to once again attack where she would land. A death knight. It was a move that was only possible because he was already a corpse. Tisk. Clank. Daggers flew out from the woman's body and stopped Taken's sword. Ha! I caught you, you bastard! Then, the old man grabbed Taken from behind. The old man grabbed hold of Taken's whole body so hard that he could crush it. Swoosh! But, Taken vanished. As the old man squinted, the woman quickly threw a small thin sword. Teacher! Behind you! Swoosh! However, he wasn't able to completely defend himself. The sword pierced the old man's back. With teleportation magic, Taken was able to move behind the old man. You are quite skilled for a monster. The old man yelled as he didn't even tend his injury. Although we aimed for his head. His reaction speed was out of the ordinary. If he was just 0.01 seconds late, his head would have been cut off. Interesting. Taken now felt amused. These humans, they were quite skilled. Perhaps, they were stronger than most people who were known to be in the top 10. They fought for hours. The scene that reminded him once again of war concluded, and the surrounding forest had been destroyed. Numerous trees were cut down, the ground was torn up as if an earthquake had occurred, and in the middle of all of this, 2 humans had collapsed. Humans are definitely not a group whose skills I can easily determine. He had won, but Taken was still shocked. His broken sword has become dust. A few of his bones were also broken. He felt like he needed to rest for at least 2 days. Freda had not fought under perfect conditions, but it was the same for the fight with these 2 humans. Their bodies were weakened as they had been unable to consume decent food for a long time. But, it still didn't change the fact that these 2 attacked Taken first. Taken raised his sword against the 2 who had fainted from their injuries. Still, I'll let you die with dignity. It was a way to show respect to the strong. To kill them in one strike, without pain. Taken approached the woman. Then, as he was about to swing his sword, the woman murmured quietly. "Dad, Mr. Myung." Taken paused for a moment. "Myung?" He didn't hear wrong. The woman definitely said Myung. Taken only knew of one Myung. Was she talking about the Myung he knew? Does she know him? Taken shook his head. If she was associated with Myung, he couldn't just kill them. His name saved your lives. Taken carried a person over each shoulder. It felt like she had a long dream. Susie was smiling in a place where her dad was fine, and Myung was there. However, darkness soon descended, and the 2 disappeared. Susie cried, and that was how the dream ended. Hey, hey, hey. She quickly raised her upper body, covered in sweat. Where am I? After she got up, Susie couldn't help but be surprised once more. She was in a place she had never been before, with a big bed, a white ceiling, and antique paintings on the wall. Are you up? The woman wearing a maid outfit naturally approached Susie. Ah, look at all this sweat. Then, with a wet cloth, she started to wipe Susie's forehead. Who are you? Susie couldn't help but ask cluelessly. The woman who appeared to be a maid smiled brightly. I heard you are the guest of our lord. Guest? Then the maid tilted her head. Emperor Knight said so. Emperor Knight? The knight that is made up of all bones. Did you not see him? Death Knight. That's what others call him. Susie widened her eyes. After finding the Death Knight, Susie and the Fighting King had attacked him. However, they were defeated. The one who should have died was being received as a guest. It didn't make sense. Especially the maid in front of her. She was definitely a human. She couldn't feel any aura of death. How could a Death Knight be with a human? Could you please wait for a moment? It is impossible to see the Lord right now. What about the person who was with me? The bald person. He is in a different room. He didn't wake up yet. Whew. Susie let out a sigh. Either way, it seemed like she hadn't died yet. Lie down for a while longer. I will bring you something to eat. No. It's okay. I don't know about anything else, but I really have a strong body. Rather, could I look around? Will you really be okay? If something happened to the Lord's guest, it would be a problem. I'm really fine. Look. Susie did a handstand. Then, with a finger, she moved on top of the bed. I'm strong, right? It seems that way. The maid laughed and nodded her head. I'll lead you. This was a castle. A really huge castle. That wasn't the only thing that was surprising. Dudakibi, elf, dwarf, fire tar. What is this place? All kinds of species were gathered at this place. Species that would never live together. and she couldn't help but gasp when she saw that there were even fire tars. Ah, one moment. Please wait for a bit. The maid who was guiding her suddenly disappeared as if something had happened. Susie, who was left alone, pondered for a moment before she started to walk alone. This is definitely a strange place. I need to look into it. It was hard to believe that their intentions were pure. It was a world like the ones in a fairy tale, but she needed to stay sharp. Susie moved while remaining as low-key as possible. It was when she had reached a room after going up some stairs. Arand, Dontuk. I heard that there was a black monster roaming around outside of the territory. I had also heard that there were sights of Freda's corpse and his other devils. Is there something we must do? Build a team and strengthen the patrol rotations. Although there are about 10 more days before Enrith arrives with his army, we don't know what may happen in the meantime. I understand, court magician. And click. Someone in the room tapped their staff. A mouse is hiding. Susie stopped her, breathed. Creak. Then, the door opened, and black hands headed towards Susie. But, Susie saw something when the door opened. Lich. Chapter 224, Omen of the Ruin, 6. Translator, Nadu. Editor, Sefter. However, there wasn't even time for her to react. It wasn't that she was simply surprised, the Lich's response was really quick. Her whole body was instantly tied up by the black hands. MMMPH. MMMPH. She tried to open her mouth forcefully, but it was no use. Then, the Lich approached. The Lich was accompanied by a Dakibi and an elf. A human. I've never seen you before. Everyone found it strange after seeing Susie's face. It was a good thing they didn't instantly kill her. However, Susie couldn't help but be scared by the massive black magical power she could feel in before her. He isn't a normal Lich. These hands that bound her, as well as the presence she felt, was beyond that of a normal Lich. But it was strange. While all this was happening, she felt some sort of odd familiarity. Are you an outsider who infiltrated the castle? The Lich spoke icily. He had a very cold tone of voice that made her feel chilly. She felt like her head would be separated from the rest of her body if she nodded right now. The hands that blocked Susie's mouth released her. She was given the opportunity to respond. What should I do? He seemed oddly familiar but still scary. Liches were normally beings that made others feel instinctive fear. Her will to fight disappeared. Even if she were to fight, she didn't think she could win. I need to speak. Nothing would be solved by keeping her mouth shut. She needed to speak before the Lich in front of her sliced her head off with his cold hands. I'm a guest of the Lord. I think. She spoke what she had heard. Of course, she had never even met the Lord, but since they said so, she thought she must be. Then, the Lich hesitated for a moment. The Lords. She wasn't sure why, but the word Lord seemed like a free pass ticket. Since although it was for just a moment, it made the Lich reconsider for a moment. But, your words seem a bit ambiguous. What do you mean? You think, you don't know it yourself? Speak. Depending on what you say, I may kill you so cruelly that it would be dreadful to remain alive. Sharp nails touched Susie's chin. At that moment, she felt queasy. Her heart beat fast. It felt like the touch of death was stirring up her insides. The Lich was currently infiltrating Susie's mind steadily to prevent her from lying. After fighting with the Death Knight, I was at this castle when I woke up. Who are you guys? Where am I? Susie was also able to tell that unless she could make up a perfect lie, the Lich would figure it out instantly. So, she asked him straight out. Are you Taken's guest? Sungmin took his hand off and rubbed his chin. It seemed like she wasn't lying. Taken? Was the name of the Death Knight, Taken? But, Susie shook her head. I'm not anyone's guest. I didn't enter because I wanted to. There are no humans who could enter this place without wanting to. However, the lich spoke in a cold, firm voice, turning his body to speak to the elf beside him. Arand. As I think she came here by mistake, please lead her back. Yes, I understand. The thin male elf bowed and obeyed his orders. He then took Susie's arm, forcibly raising her, and started to drag her out. But, even while she was being dragged out, her gaze was fixed on the lich. What was this feeling? The feeling as if she had seen that lich somewhere. She felt like that. Sungmin turned his body once again and re-entered the room. If Takan brought a human, there would be a reason. As Takan was one of the few beings he trusted, he couldn't just be hostile to a guest he had brought. A huge black beast. A few crystals were placed inside the room. And within the crystals, traces of a black beast were shown. It was the result of search magic that Sungmin had spread around the territory. However, as its speed was so great, only a few could capture its figure. It was definitely strong. Perhaps more than Sungmin had expected. He felt like there wasn't anyone else within the territory who could fight it one-on-one besides his lord, Muyong. The problem was that he couldn't figure out the monster's intent. It just kept roaming around their territory. Did it want something else? Sungmin shook his head. For some reason, the scenes didn't capture his attention. After seeing the woman who he took for a spy, he felt confused. A feeling as if I had seen her before. As he grabbed his staff, a black bison was summoned. After sitting on top of it, Sungmin was lost in his thoughts for a while as he rubbed his chin. A woman who seemed slightly young to be called a woman, like she was just in her late teenage years. But, he felt like he had seen her before. Sungmin never forgot anyone who he had seen even once. So, the fact that he couldn't remember. Did I see her before I lost my memories? Sungmin's memories were incomplete. He tried to remember, but not everything came into his mind. Although he had a strong sense that he needed to find something, he didn't know exactly what it was. But, what were this familiarity, and this sense of loss? Was she the one he had been searching for? It's too coincidental. That couldn't be the case. If she was, then fate was playing a game on them. And Sungmin didn't believe in fate. There was no way what he was looking for would come and find him. Even though she might seem similar, she would be one of many encounters that passed him by. Finding my lost memories is something that I need to do after winning this war. Enrith was the strongest among all demon kings. If they won against him, it would be like taking a step forward in the fight with the demon gods. Muyong had a lot of expectations of this fight. And Sungmin's role was to draw as much time as he could until Enrith arrived. For his victory. The one thing Sungmin, who had lost his memories, knew. That he was a pawn for Muyong's victory. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. The maid continuously bowed towards the elf named Arand. The court magician has shown mercy. Be thankful. Yes. The maid looked glad as the elf left after telling her this. Then, when the elf disappeared from sight, the maid began to talk. Wu, I told you not to go anywhere. We both could have been goners. I'm sorry. Susie spoke honestly. If she had listened to the maid and just stayed put, they wouldn't have been in this sort of situation. But, we were fortunate. As the palace magician is quite a good person. If you were caught by Kalmu, sigh. Who is Kalmu? The one who leads the dwarves at this territory. He has exceptional crafting skills. Crafting skill. It seemed like she was talking about the skills of a blacksmith. Since something like this can't happen again, please pay attention and follow me. I'll guide you properly. Thank you. The maid adjusted her clothing and started to move again. Here is the kitchen, this is the stock room, here is the magic research lab, and here is the forge room. Susie's expression continuously changed. And in the midst of all her expressions, she seemed surprised. First, everything was on a large scale. The facilities were all extremely big. Susie had been living in the great city. She had seen many large buildings that existed within the great city. But this was on par with the great city. Rather, there were even areas where they excelled. What is this place? She never expected that a group of this size would live in the demon god's territory. It was a great culture shock to her, who thought that the great city was the best there was. What was more surprising, was that there were different races living in different parts of the territory. Although they respected each other's areas and didn't interfere, they still helped each other out. The scene made her feel like she was dreaming. This is the liquor room. As the name suggests, it's the place where we store liquor. The liquor room. Of course, the place she showed the most interest in was the liquor room. If it is here, you can enter. Do you want to? Yes. She replied instantly. The maid brightly smiled as they entered the liquor room. The place was enormous. It was the biggest one Susie had ever seen. There are so many people who enjoy liquor. So, we had to renovate it many times. The maid continued to explain excitedly. Susie, who was listening carefully to what she said, couldn't help but be nervous when they reached the middle of the room. Who is that giant? Where? Ah, Augur. One huge fire giant was sitting in the corner pouring the liquor in the cask into his mouth. It was a fire tar. A monster that was known as the strongest and most obstinate giant. Additionally, the first tar in front of them didn't seem like an ordinary fire tar. As Susie became cautious, the maid seriously approached the fire tar with her hands on her hips. Augur! You hid in this room again. I told you you can't drink whatever you want. Humph, the liquor made by the elves are the best. It is a sin to not drink it. The fire tar called Augur snorted. Then Augur rolled his eyes and looked at Susie. But, you are a new face. Who is this? Is this your kid? What are you saying? I'm a single woman who hasn't even married yet. I can never tell the age of humans. They all look the same. Myung, at least he looks a bit different for me to differentiate him. Why don't you try putting on a horn? Don't change the subject. Get out, quickly. You're annoying like a fly. I get it, I get it. Damn it, I can't even drink when I want to. Augur got up as he smacked his lips. A fire tar who was intimidated by a human. Susie blanked out seeing something like this for the first time. Then, she suddenly widened her eyes after thinking about a word Augur said. Myung. Hey! Did you just say Myung? What? I can't call Myung now. Augur scratched his head. Susie's heart raced quickly. Worry, surprise, and joy. She didn't think there would be anyone else using the name Myung. Not that. Do you know of Myung? Are you making fun of me right now? Myung is the king of this place. The king. When she thought about it, even the maid told her Susie had come to visit the Lord. Did the Death Knight Taken bring her to this place because he realized she was associated with Myung? Mr. is here at this place. She was able to find out he wasn't dead. She also knew that he was the one who attacked the great city. When she found him, she was planning to ask him why. However, she felt dumbfounded after finding out he was nearby. If he really was beside her, she would have just hugged him without even thinking about it. Can I meet this lord? Then the maid beside her shook her head. Not right now. No one can enter the Lord's room right now. Why? It's the Lord's order. I don't know anything else besides this. Or, you can go ask Kalmu. He would probably know more details. After listening to her, Augur interfered. Ah, are you going to Kalmu? Then I'll go with you. I have to see him too. You are trying to get some liquor from Kalmu, aren't you? Ahem. Augur cleared his throat. No, you can't. After hearing Susie's story, Kalmu shook his head. It felt like the word never was written on his face. I must meet him. You can't right now. Besides, he isn't someone who an outsider could just meet. Then what must I do to meet him? There is nothing you can do to meet him. How can I let a human who I've never seen before meet him? However, the Death Knight named Taken who brought me here. Still no. Kalmu was firm. He was like a wall. Then, Augur asked. Is Myung still not coming out? It has already been 3 days. Wait for a bit longer. It's the process of making eternity his own. Even if he is our lord, it won't be easy. I'm not really worried. He is a human who really seems to be able to do anything. Anyway, do you have any leftover liquor? You've become a drunk. Liquor is just romantic. I can't talk to those who don't know romance. That. Thud. It was at that moment. The whole castle shook. However, the sound was heard from outside of the castle. Barag. The huge sound of a horn could be heard. After hearing this sound, Augur's expression hardened. The enemy has arrived. The sound of the horn seems out of the ordinary. Did a monster appear? Augur acted first. As if Kalmu had something to do, he started to move as well. What about me? Stay here quietly. That was all the advice they gave. In the end, Susie was left alone. Alone. No one was looking after her. This is a great opportunity. I can't lose this chance. This time, Susie was planning to be more careful. She had blanked out when she was caught by the lich. This time, Susie reduced her presence as much as she could, and became one with the shadows. Myung is at this place. The person who she thought she would never meet again. So for her to be told to stay put, was no different than torture. Susie moved. She started her search to locate the room where Myung was. Chapter 223, Omen of the Ruin, 5. Translator, Nadu. Editor, Sefter and Area. Taken looked at the sword. The sword was broken into 2 pieces. It was what he received after being defeated by Freda. Even though Taken could repair it right away, he did not do so. It was to find the reason, as he thought again about his defeat. Didn't I get stronger? He thought he had become stronger. Indeed, he had defeated many strong men and proved his own power. However, it seemed like that was only comparable to the standards of humans. As much as Taken had gotten stronger, Myung and Sungmin had improved even more. As Myung was such a mysterious man, he felt that this could happen with him, but Sungmin was unexpected. Even Taken was thrilled by seeing how he had taken care of Roosevelt and even Freda. The numerous deaths that resulted through Sungmin's hands, and the monsters of the void. Freda was helpless in front of Sungmin. His devils could do nothing but let themselves be attacked helplessly. Taken had no choice but to feel the difference in their level in addition to Myung. He felt like he was looking at a flower on top of a cliff. However much he reached out, he couldn't reach it. And with Sungmin, it was an especially great shock to Taken as he was originally weaker than him. When did he get that far ahead of me? What had happened in just 2 years? And for the last 2 years, what was Taken doing? The tables have turned. Even a few years ago, Sungmin was weaker than Taken. Perhaps he had been consumed by conceit. I'm strong, I've become stronger, and I will get stronger. Did he not put in too much thought because he thought it was so obvious? Taken left the territory. The territory was celebrating their victory for the moment. Either way, since they had stopped their enemy's advance team, there was a bit of time before the rest of their enemies arrived. He left the territory and entered deep into the woods. The fight isn't over yet. That was right. Nothing would change by reprimanding his actions. If Sungmin had gotten stronger, Taken just needed to get stronger as well. The war was the best stage on which to get stronger. Although they had taken care of the Demon Kings, Enrith still remained. There should be at least a few hundreds of thousands of devils under his command. Even having a celebration right now in the territory was to relieve the tension that people felt. Swoosh! Swoosh! However, Taken swung his broken sword. He was diligently swinging his sword so that he could reduce the gap while others were playing around. Certainly, I have been a bit lazy. He had slightly neglected his training once he felt he had gotten stronger. Through this fight and Sungmin's appearance, he realized it more dearly. Although he was one of the rulers of Ashura's path, he was lacking strength as a ruler. He needed to gain a bit more power to become a true ruler. At least until he defeated Sungmin and Weung, he couldn't be called a true ruler. As a ruler only existed to win and reign. Shuffle shuffle. He felt someone's presence. Taken stopped his swinging and carefully turned his body. They were skillful people, he would have missed their presence if it wasn't for the sound of wind and grass. Who are you? Was it the devils who had escaped? Freda had tried to escape with his subordinates. But if it was Freda and his devils who had appeared, it would be very welcoming. Then, their two people appeared. There were two of them, but they didn't look so good. An old man who had glaring eyes but a weary face, and a woman with messy hair and ragged clothing, were on a tree looking down at Taken. Teacher, it's a death knight. Can we eat it? Stop it. How can you eat a monster that's only bones? It seemed like the two were starving. Well, although it was a forest, there weren't a lot of living creatures. Even most of the plants were poisonous. If a human were to consume it carelessly, they would become sick. Why are humans in a place like this? Taken raised his sword. However, he was curious. The Sky Lord would never allow intruders into the demon god's territory. Unless they were humans who normally lived in this place, there was no way for them to pass the Sky Lord to enter this territory. The woman and the old man looked at Taken with astonishment. He seems like he is quite intelligent for a death knight. We can capture him and ask him all sorts of questions. Then, the two took a weird stance and leaped towards Taken. I don't know who you guys are, but don't think you will come out of this alive since you have attacked me. This was a good thing since he was feeling down at the moment. It would have been better if it was Freda and the devils, but he couldn't just let visitors who had no authorization trespass in this place. Taken swung his broken sword. Slash! The magical energy that soared out of the sword sliced through the air. As if they had made a prior arrangement, the woman and the old man separated simultaneously. It was to attack Taken from multiple sides. Quite good. They synchronized well. Additionally, their skills were also quite good. Among humans, he rarely saw people who could move the way they did. However, Taken had already fought with those who were considered to be the top 10. Thud. The woman and the old man weren't able to cause any damage to Taken. They continued to attack and defend at the same time. Although they were simple martial arts movements, their proficiency was like none other. And as they synchronized, they were able to exhibit more than their skills normally would allow them to. But, it still is not enough. Taken wasn't weak. Although he felt that when comparing himself to Weung and Sungmin, truthfully, Taken was strong enough. Taken wielded his sword. As the woman jumped low to avoid his attack, he twisted his body in a mysterious way to once again attack where she would land. A death knight. It was a move that was only possible because he was already a corpse. Tisk. Clank. Daggers flew out from the woman's body and stopped Taken's sword. Ha! I caught you, you bastard! Then, the old man grabbed Taken from behind. The old man grabbed hold of Taken's whole body so hard that he could crush it. Swoosh! But, Taken vanished. As the old man squinted, the woman quickly threw a small thin sword. Teacher! Behind you! Swoosh! However, he wasn't able to completely defend himself. The sword pierced the old man's back. With teleportation magic, Taken was able to move behind the old man. You are quite skilled for a monster. The old man yelled as he didn't even tend his injury. Although we aimed for his head, his reaction speed was out of the ordinary. If he was just 0.01 seconds late, his head would have been cut off. Interesting. Taken now felt amused. These humans, they were quite skilled. Perhaps, they were stronger than most people who were known to be in the top 10. They fought for hours. The scene that reminded him once again of war concluded, and the surrounding forest had been destroyed. Numerous trees were cut down, the ground was torn up as if an earthquake had occurred, and in the middle of all of this, 2 humans had collapsed. Humans are definitely not a group whose skills I can easily determine. He had won, but Taken was still shocked. His broken sword has become dust. A few of his bones were also broken. He felt like he needed to rest for at least 2 days. Freda had not fought under perfect conditions, but it was the same for the fight with these 2 humans. Their bodies were weakened as they had been unable to consume decent food for a long time. But, it still didn't change the fact that these 2 attacked Taken first. Taken raised his sword against the 2 who had fainted from their injuries. Still, I'll let you die with dignity. It was a way show respect to the strong. To kill them in one strike, without pain. Taken approached the woman. Then, as he was about to swing his sword, the woman murmured quietly. Dad, Mr. Myung. Taken paused for a moment. Myung? He didn't hear wrong. The woman definitely said Myung. Taken only knew of one Myung. Was she talking about the Myung he knew? Does she know him? Taken shook his head. If she was associated with Myung, he couldn't just kill them. His name saved your lives. Taken carried a person over each shoulder. It felt like she had a long dream. Susie was smiling in a place where her dad was fine, and Myung was there. However, darkness soon descended, and the 2 disappeared. Susie cried, and that was how the dream ended. Hey, hey, hey. She quickly raised her upper body, covered in sweat. Where am I? After she got up, Susie couldn't help but be surprised once more. She was in a place she had never been before, with a big bed, a white ceiling, and antique paintings on the wall. Are you up? The woman wearing a maid outfit naturally approached Susie. Ah, look at all this sweat. Then, with a wet cloth, she started to wipe Susie's forehead. WH, who are you? Susie couldn't help but ask cluelessly. The woman who appeared to be a maid smiled brightly. I heard you are the guest of our lord. Guest? Then the maid tilted her head. Emperor Knight said so. Emperor Knight? The knight that is made up of all bones. Did you not see him? Death Knight. That's what others call him. Susie widened her eyes. After finding the Death Knight, Susie and the Fighting King had attacked him. However, they were defeated. The one who should have died was being received as a guest. It didn't make sense. Especially the maid in front of her. She was definitely a human. She couldn't feel any aura of death. How could a Death Knight be with a human? Could you please wait for a moment? It is impossible to see the Lord right now. What about the person who was with me? The bald person. He is in a different room. He didn't wake up yet. Whew. Susie let out a sigh. Either way, it seemed like she hadn't died yet. Lie down for a while longer. I will bring you something to eat. No. It's okay. I don't know about anything else, but I really have a strong body. Rather, could I look around? Will you really be okay? If something happened to the Lord's guest, it would be a problem. I'm really fine. Look. Susie did a handstand. Then, with a finger, she moved on top of the bed. I'm strong, right? It seems that way. The maid laughed and nodded her head. I'll lead you. This was a castle. A really huge castle. That wasn't the only thing that was surprising. Dudakibi, elf, dwarf, fire tar. What is this place? All kinds of species were gathered at this place. Species that would never live together. And she couldn't help but gasp when she saw that there were even fire tars. Ah, one moment. Please wait for a bit. The maid who was guiding her suddenly disappeared as if something had happened. Susie, who was left alone, pondered for a moment before she started to walk alone. This is definitely a strange place. I need to look into it. It was hard to believe that their intentions were pure. It was a world like the ones in a fairy tale, but she needed to stay sharp. Susie moved while remaining as low-key as possible. It was when she had reached a room after going up some stairs. Arand, Dontuk. I heard that there was a black monster roaming around outside of the territory. I had also heard that there were sights of Freda's corpse and his other devils. Is there something we must do? Build a team and strengthen the patrol rotations. Although there are about 10 more days before Enrith arrives with his army, we don't know what may happen in the meantime. I understand, Court Magician. And click. Someone in the room tapped their staff. A mouse is hiding. Susie stopped her breathed. Creak. Then, the door opened, and black hands headed towards Susie. But, Susie saw something when the door opened. Ledge. Chapter 226, Omen of the Ruin, End. Translator, Nadu. Editor, Dearest Kafka. An ancient devil, Balrog. There was no known source. They existed from a certain moment and disappeared in another. There were different theories, but among them, the most plausible one was that the world had once been destroyed by the Balrogs. The Balrogs were too strong and there wasn't anything in this world that could compete with them. However, the Balrogs had a very militant tendency. They couldn't resist their urge for destruction and they were great predators. They even ate their kind when they were hungry. In the end, the Balrogs that survived after killing all living things in the underworld, ate each other until they became extinct. And the Balrogs that survived until now were the ones who were placed asleep by using a very high magic skill. Among them, strong Balrogs even had the strength that was comparable to the demon gods. They were uncontrollable and they even consumed magic that they normally went rampage before they self-destructed, but it was certain that the things around the Balrog became destroyed. It became a land of the death that didn't even let a single plant survive. The source of life is its driving force. Thud. Crash. It went wild. The giant monster was crushing everything it touched. Whenever its paws touched, everything disappeared with a tremendous upheaval. Bi Sungming watched the scene expressionlessly. The monster that suddenly appeared was greedily coveting life around him. Although they instantly had soldiers tried to stop it, the damage continued to grow. It is just him. Are we unable to stop just that one enemy? Augur yelled. He was the vice-chieftain of the Fire Tars and took the role of leading the Fire Tars. That was right. It was only one opponent. However, Balrog didn't get tired. It wasn't even using its energy to produce its strength. Absorption. He was absorbing the lives of those in its proximity, killing them and using their stamina as its own. Although it wasn't certain, he was able to conclude, taking his time and carefully observing. I don't think I can use Hydra and Beatrice. Hydra was a being that had reached its peak of life and Beatrice was a witch who used it as a source of her sacrifice to summon. If they were summoned, a great catastrophe would occur. Through the two types of strength, Balrog will destroy the entire territory. Sungmin had to seal two of his best moves. We will face him using just the specters and the undead. However, it was useless to the undead and the specters. As Sungmin declared it, the Dakibus and the elves backed off first. Do you want us to fall back as well? Augur expressed his complaint. But, Sungmin shook his head. Balrog absorbs life and makes it into his own. If we fight any more, it is no different than giving Balrog more strength. Our comrades were killed. If we back off like this, we would have no face. Even though Augur was open-minded, as long as he led the fire tars, he couldn't help but follow their rules. That was what it meant to become the leader of the fire tars. If he was to disregard the death of their comrades, Augur could no longer lead them. Sungmin explained further. If we remove its 2 horns, it would no longer absorb any more strength. When we do, I'll leave the rest to you. Balrog was able to absorb life through 2 long horns. If they were to get rid of those 2 horns, they would be able to gain an overwhelming advantage. I understand. Augur also knew that he couldn't be stubborn with this matter any further. It was no other than Weung's war. He couldn't spoil things for him. Afterwards, Augur left with the fire tars. There were about 40,000 specters. If they add up the number of undead, it would reach 50,000. Sungmin started to command them all. I need to check from the bottom. He had confirmed that Balrog absorbed life and made it its own. Now he needed to find out how much strength it could exhibit without doing so. Once he finds out about his baseline, it would be easier to fight it. Gather low frequencies and make them resonate. Sungmin gathered shade-type specters. The shades were existences that were made up of low frequencies. They were the source of terror and specters without any form. There were about 2,000 of them. He gathered the shades and resonated with them at a high speed. He created a magic circle in the air and infinitely rotated them and only pulled out low frequencies. The process would be impossible for a normal magician. It required great knowledge and precise adjustments without any errors. Soon, it resonated and the frequency that had now doubled due to resonation was shot towards Balrog. Low frequency was not magic. Balrog was able to absorb even magic, but Sungmin thought it wouldn't be able to absorb the raw strength. A normal living being is received with this sort of an attack, it would create an extreme self-dissociation. It would hurt itself and even try to end its own life. It was effective. Balrog let out a scream and began to bump into the surrounding rocks. It hit its head onto the group and bit its arm. However, the problem was it didn't leave much of a mark as it had such a strong skin. I need to make that skin softer. This also needed to be done without using magic. I need to use some beads. Sungmin spoke to the 9-tailed foxes. The 5 9-tailed foxes were strong specters who would only follow Weung. After becoming a specter, they had become real and their strength was easily comparable to a dragon. And the strength of the 9-tailed foxes was concentrated in the beads. It was similar to the life vessel liches used. The beads. Where are you planning to use it? The 9-tailed foxes were wary. It was obvious for them to act this way. If their beads were to be destroyed, they were no different than a normal fox. If there was Weung, they would have passed it over without any hesitation, but he was someone else. However, they knew that Sungmin was someone who followed Weung for a very long time. If someone else had requested it, they would have ripped their hearts out. I'm going to divide Balrog's strength. The 9-tailed foxes looked at each other. Spells or seduction didn't work on Balrog. Only the attack produced by Sungmin. They pondered for a moment before handing over their beads. The beads were the size of a fist but glowed very brightly. You cannot use it thoughtlessly. Don't worry. The beads floated around Sungmin. It was a type of storage. The beads played the same role as a wall that separated the interior and the exterior. He amplified his power and confined Balrog. The reason why Balrog was strong was that he could absorb. Not just simply living being, but he also could absorb the surrounding magic. There was a reason why people said Balrog had destroyed the world once. But, if he could completely block the flow of the surrounding land using the 5 beads, Balrog would weaken. The 5 beads floated in the air and soon approached the Balrog, then radiating light to each other. Afterwards, the beads drew a pentagram and trapped Balrog in the middle. It was the power of a complete blockage. It would be hard to exert its original power without breaking through the 5 walls. In its current state, while its consciousness was disrupted, would he be able to break through all 5 walls? Sungmin then struck his staff onto the ground once. Fire range attacks from the north. As it is a place full of water energy, it would weaken the Balrog's skin. The pentagram also appeared as 5 elements as well. Among the 5 points, north was a place where the element of water was maximized. If they were to attack there, it would produce an effect on the Balrog. And Sungmin's thoughts were valid. As the specters with water energy started to pour long-ranged attack, cracks began to show on Balrog's skin. The walls of the pentagram only restricted the inside. There was no limit to what could enter from the outside. The screams grew louder. It was an effective strategy devised by Sungmin. After becoming an elder lich, Sungmin gained more knowledge. It meant he was able to naturally understand the use of things. As someone didn't just become strong just because he learned a lot of strong skills. Sungmin hit his staff down and teleported to the north side of the pentagram. After gathering water energy of the surrounding and making it into a sword form, he drew a line. Slash. One of Balrog's horns was cut off. Gray Aok. Iraya. Thud. Thud. Thump. Balrog made a scene. It tried to get out by smashing its body onto the wall. However, it was a useless act and it only made it use up its stamina continuously. Afterwards, the Balrog stopped moving. It fell to the ground and twitched its body. It died. Sungmin raised his hand for a moment. He stopped his attack. Then, even the raising and lowering of his chest stopped. He died. At least as a living being, his life had disappeared. But Sungmin then frowned. Get away. Balrog's skin turned red. It boiled up and his whole body started to burn. He was dead. But he was revived. He used up the last bit of his energy to regenerate. No, it wasn't regeneration. Self-explosion. Gray. Balrog got up again. As it stretched out his hand, a huge flame was created. Crack. Crack. That alone broke the wall. It meant it was a power that could not withstand even the blocking force. I'm late. It was too late to avoid. Sungmin created another wall. A huge wall created by bones. The wall, full of all kinds of power of death and specters, was Sungmin's shield which blocked even the breath of the dragon. Blast. Afterwards, the pentagram broke and intense flames spread everywhere. The specters who were unable to avoid it evaporated and the range of where the flames touch were widening. If they were to leave this be, it would even swallow up the territory. I didn't keep in mind that it could self-explode. He was completely taken back. It was probably programmed in its biological system for it to self-explore upon death. The flames were strong. The wall created by Sungmin was slowly burning up. If it continued like this. It seems like I'm not late. Susie appeared without a care in the world. And she appeared within the flames. The flames that burned everything. No specter or a monster could stop those flames. But, as if it was nothing, Susie shrugged her shoulders and stretched out her hand. Then the flames began to be sucked into Susie's hand. That woman is. She was the woman who he saw a few hours ago. When he saw her then, she didn't seem special at all. She had excellent physical ability but not much magical ability. However, the magical ability he felt now. Everyone get behind me. Susie spread both of her hands widely. Then a huge wall of light was created and consumed the flames in a wide-range scale. Naturally, the specters and undead gathered behind Susie. It was strange. No matter how the situation was, there was no reason for the specters and the undead to naturally listen to her. Unless it was Myung or Sungmin, it could never happen. How? Sungmin couldn't help but be shocked. However, Sungmin knew of that power. It's delicious. I can't believe that fire tastes so delicious. Susie tapped her belly as she tilted her head. The idea of eating flames was also strange. But, she felt like it was possible. In her current position, she felt like it could only be done by her. She just naturally learned it. Sungmin widened his eyes. That appearance, that power. That's definitely Muyong's. The Master of Flames. Unless what he saw was wrong, this was definitely Muyong's power. Chapter 227, ALS Nova, 1. Translator, Subuk. Editor, Area. There was no way there existed another ability that could devour fire, utilize its force and not let any fire close. But how was that woman able to imitate Muyong's power? An imitation. That's right. That wasn't Muyong's real power. If it was Muyong, he would have devoured that fire in an instant. But that woman wasn't able to do that. She was mixing something from the light attribute and walking on a tightrope. Although it wasn't at the level of the authority of fire which Muyong possessed, it was surely something similar to that. Can you help me? I don't think I will be able to block all that. B. Susie looked at B. Sungmin. Fire burning. The blaze seemed like it was going to destroy the world. That Balrog had been alive since ancient times, so maybe it was because of that the internal energy it had stored was unimaginable. Master is getting involved. Sungmin came to a conclusion on his own. Giving orders to the undead and the specters and imitating the power of fire wasn't a normal thing at all. In the first place, Muyong's power was miles away of being something that could be transmitted. But the originality, a power that had its own characteristic, was that possible merely by inheriting or transmitting? So that meant that Muyong had allowed that power. But why? He hadn't heard anything beforehand. In the first place, Muyong had closed the doors of his manor and confined himself. But there was still a point of contact with Muyong, when he doesn't know anything. Sungmin didn't like that. At least, the closest ones under the influence of Muyong were Taken or himself. And that woman was just a nobody that appeared out of nowhere. I will need an explanation after everything ends. Sungmin's voice was as cold as it could be. Muyong was the master that had saved Sungmin, made him, and gave him everything that he currently had. That fact didn't change even if they were 2 years apart. It was obvious that he would follow him, and so he decided to support him by his side. The reason he increased his strength and forces was to prepare for when Muyong, his master, returned. So there was something I didn't know. It bothered him, and she was also a woman that got on his nerves. That was true because she continued to disrupt his mind even after he sent her off. But before that, the consciousness of her being someone that appeared out of nowhere was stronger. That was the reason Sungmin couldn't get close to her. I understand. Quickly. Susie gritted her teeth. The beginning was the only time she could feel the taste of the fire. Even though she had received Muyong's strength, what Susie could use was strictly limited. Muyong was the administrator of the dam. That meant that he was the one that held the decision on how much he was going to be released from the dam. In addition, Muyong was like the sea and Susie was merely a lake. If she could receive endlessly, then her body wouldn't be able to endure. Kappa Alpha Lambda Eta Nu, Chi Tau Alpha Dot. Kappa Alpha Lambda Eta Nu, Chi Tau Alpha Dot. Sungmin performed a block once again. He summoned the sturdiest shield he possessed and called the witch Beatrice by offering the Hydra. Block the fire. Kya. The witch screamed. A ray of light came out of her only eye and her mouth and then split up to stop the fire. Sungmin's staff trembled. It had started to congest for having surpassed the magic limit. However, Sungmin's ability to control magic was one of a kind. This meant that his foundations as a magician had reached its peak. If it was simply magical talent, then Sungmin was confident on not falling behind Enrith or Amun. His magic power continued to get amplified more and more while it was exploding. And so, his magic power surpassed 700 in an instant. Turn over. The moment his magic power passed 700, his words started to hold strength. It was an obvious thing as his magic power had transcended although for an instant. When he suppressed the fire, the ground turned over and devoured the flames. If Suzy had taken care of the initial phase, then the remaining thing was all taken care of by Sungmin. Totter. Sungmin tottered. We could have been in deep trouble, are you okay? Suzy opened her eyes widely and said. A lich was evil in nature but it was following Weung. There wasn't only the lich but also an incredible number of undead, specters, etc. Suzy still didn't know what she was doing or where was this place. So she thought that there would certainly be a reason. For Suzy, Weung was good even though he was a bit silent. Let's rest for a moment. Sungmin kept balance with his staff. A huge dog appeared as he dusted off his hands. Suzy looked at Sungmin riding on a huge black dog with strange eyes. That great of a magician follows Mr. Honestly speaking, it was the first time she met a magician on that level. No human being would be able to do what that lich just did. Even an archmage that has obtained Amon's star wouldn't be able to show that kind of miracle. And even if she wasn't able to see properly at war, the quality of the undead, specters and monsters was different. Even the great city would be in danger in front of these numbers. Gulp. Mr. Just. Merely a few years. Weung had achieved a lot of things in that time. And would have worked harder than that. Suzy clenched her fists. She didn't know what she could do but decided to do everything she could. She determined herself like that. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Bang. Enrith slammed down his staff. He was looking at the Balrog. He watched everything from overwhelming the Balrog alone, and self-destructing due to the spell. Elder Lich, he's not easy to deal with. It was just for a moment but the power of the Elder Lich became comparable to his even though just for a moment. Thanks to that he didn't suffer much damage even at the self-destruction of the Balrog. But what about the human woman that appeared out of nowhere? Is that woman the one that killed Sharshazar? Sharshazar had died by the hands of a human. Was that human that woman? A special person that could control fire. It seemed like she would be able to show great strength in special conditions. If Sharshazar had fallen into a trap, he could have been defeated by that woman. But that's not enough. It wasn't as much as he had expected. He should rather be more aware of the Elder Lich. You could say that the spell to amplify magic power was an art. Even Enrith wasn't able to do that. I want that Lich. 3 demon kings have died. He needed a new demon king to protect and assist him. A Lich was a king in the first place. He didn't know why a king was along insignificant beings but he thought that he may be able to lead him to the correct road. In addition, he thought that the 3 demon kings together didn't amount to the worth of that Lich. Enrith judged that the Elder Lich hadn't grown completely but wasn't able to do so. It was because there was no magician that could guide him in magic. But Enrith was suitable in that side. And if his abilities were outstanding, he could take him to the Devil Amon and let him acquire magical knowledge. Perhaps, he may become more outstanding than the Monarch of Death. The 4 transcendent beings. If he obtained a being that could surpass the Monarch of Death, that was one of the 4, then Amon's strength would also become greater. It hurt that he lost 3 demon kings and even the Balrog but obtaining that Lich could compensate all that. That Lich was more worthy than that. He would be paying it cheap if he obtained the Lich. Increase the speed. Enrith ordered. At that moment, a huge castle flying in the sky started to move faster. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Weung was floating in the air while sitting on his knees. He closed his eyes and stimulated his senses. He had obtained a divinity. Even if it was only a half, he had now become a half immortal. The world looked different to him now that he became an immortal. All the things. Even if those things weren't living beings, everything flowed. Weung was also only one point of that flow. Perhaps, being a god wasn't that complicated at all. The important thing was how well could one sympathize with these things that flowed. Such as things like air and magic power that was on the earth. What kind of being is a devil? He suddenly got curious. The devils were also gods, but they didn't belong inside the flow. They aren't able to sympathize. They didn't have the ability to sympathize, although they were gods. That's why they are evil. The world doesn't accept them. Myung entered the flow. He thought that the answer would be at the ring of this flow. Myung's soul started to get smaller and smaller, and at some point entered a certain breach. A breach, or a door. The moment he opened that door, he found a transparent being. You are not an invited being. Who are you? It was a surprising thing. Myung's soul had gotten smaller than everyone else's and entered a breach that he could only enter while his soul was small, but there was someone already there. I am the administrator of nothingness. And this is the lowest floor of all. This is the place where the ones that couldn't become gods or lost their divinities fall to. But you are strange. It was the voice of a man, but it also sounded like a woman's. Nothingness. Myung repeated the words of the being. Nothingness. In other words, nihility. There were many talking about this place, but no one knew exactly what kind of place this was. The administrator spoke. You are not a fallen one. So you came to this place by yourself? I have seen someone like you once. You did. The name of that person was called Solomon. He wanted the key. Do you also want the key? Myung frowned. He said that Solomon had come to this place to look for a key. That meant that he was an immortal that could find nothingness. But if Solomon is an immortal, does that mean that he didn't die yet? What does key mean? The key exists to open things that are closed. The key he wanted was the key to open the door of nothingness and demon world. Nothingness and the demon world. This was the reason why a passageway connecting Earth and the demon world appeared out of nowhere. But why did he want the key of nothingness? Can I also obtain those keys? You can, but instead you have to give your most treasured things. That is the rule of nothingness. Do you mean that I have to cut an arm? No way. For example, your lover, emotions, name, those kinds of things. Physical things don't hold any meaning in the nothingness. So Solomon threw two of those things. Because he obtained two keys. Solomon obtained two keys. It meant that an immortal with a divinity threw away two precious things to obtain the keys. Myung shook his head. He wasn't planning on throwing himself just to obtain a key from someone. I don't need it. You are really peculiar. Fine. I think that you will be able to give me something more worthy than those kind of things. I don't need anything in particular. No, you do. Right. ALS Nova. How about the book of the great magician? Myung flinched. ALS Nova. It was a book that had magic powerful enough to destroy the Blue Temple. ALS Nova had gone to the hands of the demon gods in the past. In the end, the great magician Merlin died by the hands of the devils and the world fell towards destruction. But of course, he now had his doubts on whether Merlin was a good existence or not at this point. Solomon told me to hand this over to the next person that comes to this place. That being could be a good or a bad god, or perhaps a human. But he also told me that I could decide whether or not I give this to them. The problem was that Solomon entrusted this to him. However, ALS Nova was something he really wanted. What do you want from me? The administrator spoke with no expression in his face. Tell me the story of having experienced the world one more time. You are a really rare person. If I listen to your story, I feel like the nothingness would be filled a bit more. Chapter 228, ALS Nova, 2. Translator, Subuk. Editor, Area. Myung could only be surprised. The story of having experienced the world one more time. That meant that he knew of Myung's return in time. But he maintained his composure externally. The administrator spoke. The concept of time doesn't exist in the nothingness. The me that you are seeing could be the me from the future or the past. That's why I can recognize a being whose shaft has gone wrong. He seemed to understand what he was saying. At least it meant that this place didn't work with normal ways of thinking. The existence of the being calling himself as administrator of nothingness was really pale. Something like a mirage. There was nothing Weong would lose by telling him the story of what he had faced. What are you curious about? About everything. Don't worry. The time you spend here doesn't affect the time in reality. He had a lot of time. Weong opened his mouth slowly. What he wanted was a story he was confident in being able to tell it until he got bored. But of course, he wouldn't think about telling the story in a funny or boring way. Enrith's castle arrived near the territory. It was big enough to cover the entire territory and it was surrounded by uncountable demons. However, he didn't proceed to attack. What he did first was to make a kind of declaration. I don't enjoy harassing the weak. Accept defeat and subject to me. But of course, the only one he wanted was the Elder Lich. The reason he spoke in that way was to find out the belief of the Elder Lich. If the Elder Lich loved and treasured this place, then it would follow Enrith. The Lich wasn't a fool. There was no way that a magician at that level would be a fool. A difference this big. The 3 demon kings and the Balrog that appeared before were merely appetizers. It wasn't possible for the Lich to not know that, and if it was a wise magician he would recognize the difference between them and lower its head. But of course. Bang! Bang bang! The magic circles that were installed exploded and damaged the nearby demons. A trap he prepared beforehand. It meant that he wasn't planning on agreeing to his terms. How foolish! It would have been good if he had admitted defeat. But it didn't matter. He could take him by force and brainwash him. Enrith hit the ground with his staff. Boom! Blue particles spread endlessly near the castle. The demons that touched that particle went berserk and turned into mad warriors. The number of demons inside the castle was 300,000. Compared to that, all the forces the territory had was merely 100,000. Even though they were better in quality, there weren't many methods to overcome the difference in numbers. If absolute power could overturn all tides, then the devils wouldn't have demon kings under their commands. Enrith thought that strong power also had its limits, and he knew several methods to strengthen his forces. Enrith sat in his throne again and savored the battlefield. They are like moths flying into fire. Devils like to suppress others by forces. And it was no different for Enrith. The maddened demons were taking the lives of their enemies with crushing power. But they couldn't easily pierce the middle. It was because of the strong undead, including the Elder Lich, were stopping them. Let's see how long you can endure. Something like a hologram appeared in front of Enrith. It was showing the battlefield live. Enrith looked at the Elder Lich with eyes of those looking at a disciple. Bi Sungmin gritted his teeth. He had prepared many things. He already knew that Enrith was going to invade, so he mobilized all his wisdom to prepare for that. The walls were built to be higher with the help of the dwarves and installed countless invisible mines in the air. He researched black magic to strengthen the undead and also improved the quality of the armor that the soldiers were wearing by a stage. He also offered lots of things as sacrifices to summon an undead knight, but I didn't have enough time. Enrith had suddenly increased the speed at which he advanced. Bi Sungmin had expected 10 days, but Enrith arrived in merely 2 days. There was a limit on how much he could prepare in 2 days. That's why he had to squeeze out what he already had. Beatrice, make a hole in the enemy's castle. The strongest card Bi Sungmin had was the witch Beatrice. The ray of light she fired encroached everything. It returned everything to nothingness. It was hard to miss a castle that big. Beatrice started to shed tears of blood after receiving Bi Sungmin's order. At that moment, a huge ray of light got fired towards Enrith Castle. An explosion so loud that shook the ground was heard. But Bi Sungmin shook his head. It doesn't work. It was shallow. The castle was being protected with Enrith magic. That meant that not even Beatrice was comparable to Enrith in magic. That by itself was fearful enough. If they couldn't make a hole in the castle, then it was hard to think about doing a guerrilla. In the end they would have to fight hand to hand, but the enemy was passing through the field of mines and charged. The demons got strengthened. How did he do it with that kind of number? The problem wasn't simply in numbers. The demons that lost their will and went berserk. Taking a glance at them, it looked like they got twice as strong. It was close to impossible to strengthen tens of thousands of demons at the same time. At least, Bi Sungmin wasn't able to do that. His limit was to strengthen 500 important undead. Enrith. He had heard that he was a magician. Then, he was a powerful being that couldn't be ignored. I will go in. At that moment Bi Suzy got next to Bi Sungmin. Bi Sungmin got to know her name. Even though they had the same surname, Bi Sungmin didn't tell his name to Bi Suzy. My name of the past isn't that important, and even if I tell her, she will just start blabbering. So she borrowed Master's strength. At the same time he realized a few more things. That Bi Suzy had come as Muyong's cover for a moment. And that Muyong was getting accustomed to the new power he had obtained. I must endure until Master recovers. He decided to throw away all the unnecessary feelings. Whatever the case, the most important thing was to hold up. You are going to that castle. Anne gave me the blessing of the moon. If I add my stealth, then I will be able to enter the ship unnoticed. This war will also end when we get that demon king, right? Anne was one of the higher-classed high elf. Bi Sungmin also wasn't able to sense Bi Suzy's presence until she got close to him and talked to him. But will assassination work on Enrith? There were 300,000 demons only on the outside. There would be even more inside. Just tell me, where is Enrith? I will get his head. Bi Sungmin thought. How foolish. Bi Suzy's thoughts were really foolish. Honestly speaking, the probabilities of success was close to 0%. It was the same even if he specified her the location. But, there were always maybes. And it would also buy they some time. Buying time. That was the most important task in the current situation. It was a battle on whether they could endure or not until Muyong appeared. If Muyong lost, everything would end, but Bi Sungmin didn't even think of Muyong losing. Wait. Bi Sungmin got determined. That he would buy time with Bi Suzy. They would be able to buy a day if they grasped Enrith location and destroyed some of the power sources supporting the castle. Bi Sungmin then flew into the air. Enrith was a magician. And magicians had a strong pride. Bi Sungmin was planning on provoking him. With a magic Enrith would never be able to imitate. Gravity field. Swoosh. It looked like rain was falling. Black particles fell down from the sky and stuck to the ground. Then, it started to pull everything in the ground with great force. It was a magic used for big battles that Bi Sungmin had come up with as he handled gravity. But the allies also weren't able to get off this influence. It couldn't even inflict big damage to the castle. It was a magic that needed more improvement, but the clear thing was that it could control gravity. Boom! The huge castle floating in the sky got pulled down to the ground. There was no bigger provocation than this. It wasn't able to damage it much, but it would scratch his pride if Bi Sungmin was Enrith. Boom! As expected, the castle started to float up once again with great force as if answering back. Enrith was interfering. Bi Sungmin read where was the center of that power. Over there. A bit higher from the center of the ship. Bi Sungmin engraved the location to Bi Suzy with carving magic and also carved some points that she had to destroy. Nod. Bi Suzy nodded. I will end this war. She had to enter before the ship floated up again. Bi Suzy moved like an arrow and Bi Sungmin continued the confrontation of pride with Enrith. This is ALS Nova. It is a book that contains the great circulation magic. The administrator handed over ALS Nova to Muyong. But it was more of a small marble than a book. However, it clearly wasn't a simple marble. When Muyong checked it up close, Countless information filled his head. Myung could only fall back a step. The information it contained was too vast that he couldn't see properly. Your soul will get destroyed if you look at it for a long time. I thought so. For him to not be able to handle the information of ALS Nova even though he obtained a half-divinity. This marble hit your consciousness and soul. But he was able to memorize some important magic in that short instant. Your story was really interesting. I hope we can meet again. The administrator of nothingness hid himself. Myung looked at the place he was standing at and then turned around. He had obtained an unexpected treasure. He didn't know that nothingness would be at the lowest place, at the smallest place. In addition, he obtained a hint that Solomon could be still alive. I will find him if he's alive. He had to ask him of his responsibility. Myung nodded and returned. His soul started to head higher and swell up and then arrived at the world. Boom! When he opened his eyes he could only hear explosions. There was quite a lot of distance from there but Myung could hear that as if it was happening right next to him. So Enrith invaded. It happened faster than he expected. But he couldn't just watch from behind because it was fast. Myung stood up. Swish! And then disappeared like smoke. We are retreating. Bi Sung-min came to a conclusion. The war became less advantageous for them the longer it kept on. They needed to retreat and inspect their arrangements. He was worried about Bi Suzy but the probabilities for her to succeed were faint. He couldn't continue to defend this place to the end while betting on that small probability. There is no hope like this. Enrith's advance was just too fast. The only thing Bi Sung-min could do with his strength was to stop him. However, not for long. Stop them. Block their escape path. It's a hunt. Wahahaha. The demons ran wild but it seemed like they hadn't gone completely crazy. They had the least bit of consciousness to hunt efficiently. That was really bothersome. Bi Sung-min clicked his tongue. If they retreated like this he would lose about 2,000 to 3,000 warriors. But he still had to do it. If he didn't, he wouldn't be able to avoid annihilation. Fall. Baea. It was at that moment. Something came flying. It came flying like a cannonball but its range couldn't be compared to a mere cannonball at all. A huge crater got formed and about 500 demons died by that aftershock. Flames. A strong fire devoured the nearby demons. The demons got astonished and fell back. Normal demons don't leave behind a corpse so the demons that were nearby turned into dust and scattered. There was someone at the middle of that. Master. Myung. He had appeared. Fudush. The ruler of fire. The fire created by the real ruler of fire couldn't get put out. At first, the fire was merely a copy of Diablo's fire but now the power became Myung's complete authority. 6 pair of wings also got created by fire. Myung approached in that state. The demons couldn't dare think to get close. Where is Bi Suzy? She entered the ship. Bi Sung-min kneed down and answered. Myung frowned. Why didn't you stop her? It was something she wished. She should at least be able to buy some time. Are you fine with that? At this point, Bi Sung-min also tilted his head. It was because this was the first time Myung asked such trivial things. Is there a reason why I shouldn't? Maybe he didn't recognize her? He could not know because Myung didn't tell him but it was too coincidental. He couldn't turn a blind eye to it. He couldn't ignore this matter anymore. How indignant would it be if he never knew the truth in front of him? But of course, he just let it pass until now because it would get more chaotic but the story changed if the two involved parties had gathered. And Myung didn't wish the two of them to fall in crueler situations because of ignorance. Myung said. Bi Suzy is your daughter. Chapter 229, ALS Nova, 3. Translator, Subuk. Editor, Area, Dearest Kafka. Just what? Bi Sung-min got serious. A daughter? He was a lich. An elder lich. The king of all liches. All the memories before that were vague. He couldn't think that he would have any ties with living beings excluding Muyong. But it wasn't just a tie, but it was his daughter? I can't make a long explanation, but B. Susie is indeed your daughter. Muyong looked up the castle. The castle that got out of the effect of the gravity field was floating up once again. In addition, even more devils had appeared and their escape route was being blocked. B. Sungmin flinched. Muyong had no reason to lie. He always spoke the truth, or at least he never lied to B. Sungmin. If Muyong's words were true, it felt like the sky was falling down the moment he thought like that. So, the thing I have to find is... B. Sungmin had always anguished. He felt like he had lost something really important. He always had the pressure that he had to find something. But he had never imagined that that something was his daughter. I didn't want to bring you confusion. No, actually I couldn't make a judgment. You are someone that stands on death and B. Susie grieves for life. That's right. Muyong couldn't make a judgment regarding this matter. That was the biggest reason, but it was also an excuse. He just couldn't judge what was right and what was wrong. B. Sungmin had died. Died and became a lich and also lost most of his memories of the past. Muyong couldn't know how knowing that he had a child would affect him in that unstable state. That's why he kept reserving it for later, but he thought that he should tell him the truth when the two involved parties have met. It wasn't that he could evade it forever. B. Susie. Is that kid really my daughter? I will respect your choice. He left saving and not saving B. Susie to B. Sungmin. B. Sungmin had become a completely new existence after he died. It meant that he didn't have to rely on memories from when he was alive. But Muyong was going to respect his decision if he chose to grab onto his past. B. Sungmin was disoriented right now. He was the one that drove B. Susie to the jaws of death even though she had requested it. He didn't feel a bit of guilt at that decision. But would he have done the same if he knew that she was his daughter? Most of B. Sungmin's emotions were dulled. A lich was originally a dry existence. It wasn't probable that denial existed in him. Why can't I remember anything? Why? But the current B. Sungmin was experiencing extreme instability in his emotions. He couldn't remember anything even though he heard the truth. But it seemed like a milder scene was being made when he put B. Susie in his memories. He wouldn't hesitate at all if memories did pop up. Is that kid alive? She is, but it seems like she is not in a good state. Muyong and B. Susie were connected. But of course, he couldn't know everything just because of that. However, the clear thing was that she was weakening. B. Sungmin nodded. I will go find her. I have never seen that kid properly. When B. Sungmin first saw B. Susie, he had compared her as a rat. And didn't try to face her after that either. Why did he do that? It was because he got swept in unknown emotions when he saw her. He had to face her properly at least once, but he couldn't do so. I need to see her. Keep looking at her until a clear picture gets drawn in my head. It wouldn't be late even after facing her, holding a proper conversation and coming to a conclusion. But he had to first rescue B. Susie if he wanted to do that. The work of rescuing someone that crawled to death. That was something that didn't suit a lich at all, as they were death itself. Muyong smiled faintly. I will open up a path. Their escape route was blocked. They couldn't do anything against the tens of thousands of strengthened devils with just 20,000. Flames. The fire got wilder. The 6 pairs of wings Muyong had got swept in the fire and became so huge it could touch the sky. And then, Muyong closed his eyes and recited. That light has certainly existed. Beams. A hole pierced the sky. And light brighter than ever covered the ground. Grey Aik. S.A., save me. It hurts. Please. Arg. The devils that touched the light struggled in pain. The divinity Muyong possessed got strengthened with a chant of Als Nova. Als Nova was a gathering of short prayers. If you possessed a divinity, you were able to show this much strength just by reciting a chant. But not even Weong knew all of the prayers. He was able to memorize some strong chants when he first saw Als Nova. Burn like fire and roar like the sea. Swoosh! Weong's wings got instantly bigger and then devoured all of the devils at its range. More than 100,000 devils perished with just 2 attacks. But there were still lots of devils left, but they couldn't help but get shocked at what happened in an instant. Totter! Weong tottered. The chants of Als Nova consume a lot of strength. At most 3 times. That was the number of chants Weong could recite. He felt like his magic power and divinity wouldn't be able to endure more than that. Shing! Weong pulled out anguish. He had succeeded in bringing chaos to the enemy and also opened up a path. He couldn't miss this opportunity. You won't be late if you go now. Followed by that, Weong raised anguish high. All the spirits, undead, Augur and Taken looked at Weong. Follow me. It's time to annihilate the enemy. Who are you? Bang! Enrith slammed down his staff. At the same time, black tentacles surged up and covered the body of the infiltrator. He couldn't think that someone could pass through countless devils and reach the center of the castle. Anyone besides Enrith would have been killed. But it was precisely because it was Enrith that he didn't get killed. The infiltrator shut her mouth shut. Blood was flowing from her body but didn't die yet. But the clear thing was that she would fall to a dangerous state soon. Enrith shook his head while looking at the infiltrator. I made the wrong question. Let me state it again. Who is he? Enrith was looking at B. Susie, but he was feeling that someone that was beyond B. Susie. He didn't kill B. Susie right away because of that strong presence. The one pulling the strings, all of that happened. Perhaps, the real one that killed Sharshazar. He was careless towards B. Susie or the Lich, but the real deal was the someone that was beyond. Is he a demon god? Someone that was born in another world like Diablo? B. Susie was connected with that someone. But he felt a gap that he didn't know. A gap this big, there were none, at least between demon kings. It was a gap he could only see in transcendent beings or demon gods. But it was also new. He had never felt a gap of this kind. B. Susie showed a small smile. It was enough with that. In other words, you are the kind that doesn't understand with good words. Enrith was curious. He felt like dying because of that curiosity. That's why he tried to take control of B. Susie's mind. Moving consciousness was Enrith's specialty. Playing with the consciousness of a completely suppressed opponent was like child's play to him. He extended his hand and grabbed B. Susie's hair. Then wrote some runes with his staff. I will ask you again. Who is he? Tell me what the existence that is inside you. It didn't take long. But B. Susie wasn't answering. She was just letting out a strange laugh. She had fainted. It didn't matter if she fainted or not if the mind control worked properly. Originally B. Susie should have answered Enrith's question. But there was only one case if she didn't answer. My mind control doesn't work. He couldn't believe it. His power to dominate wasn't working. The Demon King of Iron Enrith. The real power he had was to control and dominate. That was also the reason he could strengthen hundreds of thousands of devils at the same time. But it was obvious for Enrith's strength to not work. When Weong got out of the Blue Temple, he planted a self-defense mechanism on B. Susie. It was a measure to not let know of others the existence of Weong, but the mechanism also had a strong mental defense. Wang Chenglin's brainwash was top class. It was also better than Enrith at some detailed parts. Compared to Enrith that simply pushed with magic power and magic, Wang Chenglin had organized the mind in a really systematic way. Weong had prepared for Wang Chunlin, so there was no way it would get pierced that easily. Only then did Enrith's expression change. So I was the one that got baited. Flames. At that moment, a huge pillar of light shone on the castle and the exploding fire engulfed the castle once again. The barrier protecting the castle melted down just like that. A defenseless state. The castle started to fall down thanks to the exchange of magic power that occurred in an instant. It was a dreadful power. Not even Enrith would be able to imitate it. This power, he was sure of it. That he had appeared. Ha! Enrith let out a roar. It was really coincidental. He was trampling down on the devils and himself after appearing like he was waiting for this moment. Perhaps he may have been the one that got baited ever since the death of Sharshazar. He had come to hunt, but he was the one being hunted. I am Enrith, the great demon king of iron. Do you think I will be defeated that easily? He couldn't admit it. He was the one that placed the traps. Hunting was also something that only he should be doing. Enrith denied the fact that he was the one to fall in a trap. Boom! 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 But that wasn't the end. Something else was coming. But this power didn't belong to him. Someone was piercing the castle now that it didn't have the barrier protecting it anymore. A fearful magic power. He was piercing a hole by amplifying his magic power. Enrith turned around. And at the same time said, Elder Lich. An elder lich that was holding a staff appeared exactly at the middle. It was absurd. He could appear at any moment, but a lich also appeared. Enrith admitted his potential and had also thought of making him his subordinate, but he changed his mind. A mere lich couldn't defeat the Demon King of Iron. If all this was his script, Enrith decided to kill that lich and woman to destroy that script. Do you think that you will be able to beat me? I didn't come to defeat you. Bi Sung-min turned his head. Bi Suzy was alive. She was in a terrible state, but what was important was that she was alive. It seemed like she had lost consciousness. Bi Sung-min shook when he saw Bi Suzy. If he had eyes, then his pupils would be shaking with no stop. Bi Sung-min looked at Enrith once again. And spoke with deep regret. I just came so that I didn't have any regrets. Chapter 230, ALS Nova, End. Translator, Subuk. Editor, Dearest Kafka. Chapter 230, ALS Nova, End. Translator, Subuk. Editor, Dearest Kafka. Death meant the end, and as such, it was a natural innate desire for one to not leave behind any regrets before breathing their last. However, Bi Sung-min wasn't a normal lich. Even now, he was still experiencing several changes after having become a lich. It wasn't just Bi Sung-min, in fact all the surrounding undead were experiencing that very change. The undead beings Muyong made were that special, and Bi Sung-min was particularly more unique among all of his creations. Bi Sung-min glanced at Bi Suzy once more. He felt weak. He didn't know why, but he wanted to put his hand on her cheeks and tell her that it was okay. Bi Sung-min didn't know what was this emotion. He only knew that he had to bring her with him to not have any regrets. A lich is talking about regrets? How funny. Boom. Enrith slammed down his staff. Tentacles and shadows surged up. Those things moved to twine round Bi Sung-min. Bi Sung-min made his magic power explode. To the point that it wouldn't be surprising for his body to get destroyed. His magic power surpassed 700 in an instant. Magic power that reaches transcendence. But how long will you be able to endure? Even Enrith got nervous. At least for this instant, Bi Sung-min was comparable to Enrith. The problem was time. Right, Bi Sung-min was not going to be able to maintain that state for a long duration. At most 3 minutes. If he overdid it, then his entire body would collapse. It's enough. Amadeus. The ceremony to summon a witch. Originally, he used the head of a hydra as an offering, but he didn't need to do that now. Overflowing magic powers. This was a much better offering than a head of a hydra. Kai-a-a-a-a-a-a-ok. The body of the witch Beatrice became smaller than before after she came out of the door, but a dark aura was swirling around her body. She eliminated the shadows and tentacles at an incredible speed and played her role really well. Meanwhile, Bi Sung-min finished preparing another magic. The strengthened Beatrice destroyed and broke everything, but it was unknown how long she was able to hold out with Enrith as her opponent. Enrith was evaluated to be the strongest demon king, so they couldn't dare to think optimistically. How insignificant! Enrith swung his staff once again. Zeeing! 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 A pentagram was drawn in the air, and followed by that, shadow archers started to appear. The arrows of the shadow archers returned everything to darkness. It could curse exterminate everything it touched. 300 of those shadow archers appeared. They stuck to the floor, air, or walls and fired arrows endlessly. Kaaak! Not even the fast Beatrice was able to dodge all those arrows. But a few hits wasn't enough. Beatrice destroyed even the shadow archers and headed towards Enrith. Doom Knight! In the meantime, the remnants of the broken shadow archers gathered to form the shape of a huge knight. Doom Knight! A being that was a level above a Death Knight. The final form of undead knights that was only heard in legends. Clash! The claws of Beatrice and the sword of the Doom Knight clashed. But Beatrice's body was the only one that increased in wounds. There's a legend that the Doom Knight was made after a great hero of the past got turned into an undead, or it was a non-existent creation that was born in those legends. However, its power was so great it could even slay dragons. The Monarch of Death commanded a few battalions of Doom Knights, but there was no saying that Enrith could not control a Doom Knight. Bi Sungmin held his silence. The strongest force he could summon right now was the current Beatrice. But Enrith's summon was strong enough to push back that Beatrice. On top of that, Enrith's specialty wasn't summoning. My magic doesn't have limits. Enrith drew a circle and soon countless eyes appeared everywhere. Eyes of Death. It was a strong spell of the curse class. A magic that weakened everything of the opponent that looked at it. But Bi Sungmin also managed to finish a spell. Abyss. The opening of hell. All the doors Bi Sungmin possessed opened and huge monsters started to appear. The surrounding terrain also changed and undead started to appear from under the ground. It was the only reality marble magic that Bi Sungmin could use. Enrith faced the enemies that surged up endlessly and put a slightly surprised look. He thought that he had seen everything but for the Lich to have hidden a spell like this one. But there was no bewilderment or fear in his face. It was only interest. How unfortunate, really unfortunate. Enrith mumbled. You could say that the growth potential of a Lich that knew how to use a reality marble was unlimited. However, the existence behind the Lich disturbed him. He had to unavoidably eliminate the Lich with his own hands, so of course it was going to be unfortunate. Enrith swung his staff widely. Swoosh! Swoosh! When he swung it like a sword, the hand of a huge beast appeared in the air and tore apart the barrier. Every magic in front of me becomes useless. The barrier of abyss broke in an instant. Bi Sungmin gritted his teeth. An opponent that Beatrice and not even abyss works on. This was the first time he faced an opponent so strong. Enrith was certainly one of the strongest magicians facing against other magicians. The remaining cards. He calculated all the cards he had available. He thought out the probabilities of winning that he had. It was incredibly low. Thinking about winning with Enrith as his opponent was absurd by itself. I'm not thinking of winning. He thought of his original purpose. Rescuing Bi Suzy. Bi Sungmin's bones swelled up and reduced repeatedly. It was because the overflowing surge of magic power was giving his body a negative impact. If he kept like this, he would perish. It was self-destruction. Bi Sungmin looked at Bi Suzy once again. And gave a secret order to Beatrice. Kaaak. Beatrice started to shed tears of blood and started to go mad. A berserker. Beatrice also started to go rampage like Bi Sungmin. The Doom Knight started to get pushed back a little mid and Bi Sungmin stuck his staff on the ground while Enrith was trying to conjure some spell. All the magic power gathered at the tip of his staff. Don't tell me. Enrith realized what Bi Sungmin was trying to do. Self-destruction. Nothing would remain at the surroundings if that much magical power exploded at once. But Bi Sungmin was controlling even that. He set up a range for the explosion and gathered enough magic power to only take out Enrith with him. The ability to control magic that was out of bounds. Useless. Enrith lowered his posture and hit the ground with his staff one more time. Something black flowed out and covered Enrith's body. Meanwhile Beatrice took Bi Suzy. She fell down the castle while holding her with her mouth. Did you say that no spell works on you? Then try to stop this. Bi Sungmin raised his staff. And then fired it towards Enrith. A magic bomb that contained unimaginable levels of magic power clashed with Enrith and let out a giant explosion. Boom! Myung raised his head. A beast was falling down the castle and an incredible explosion of magic engulfed the castle. Bi Sungmin. Myung frowned. The beast got in front of Myung while holding Bi Suzy with its mouth. The castle also exploded and was falling down rapidly. So he self-destructed. He gathered all magical power to one point and exploded it. But the reason he only destroyed the castle was thanks to his outstanding skills. If Bi Sungmin ran wild and self-destructed without any measures, then the explosion would have also reached the territory. But what Bi Sungmin self-destructed was merely a shell. All liches kept their life vessels apart. Not even Myung knew where that was, but he could revive Bi Sungmin as long as he found that life vessel. The problem was Enrith. The battle was coming to an end. The demons got weakened as Myung appeared. Myung's power after obtaining his half-divinity wasn't something normal demons could do something about. But Myung raised his head. Enrith. He was floating in the air while having become a mess. A mere lich dares to. A mere lich. Maybe it was because he suffered an unexpected blow. Enrith, that was said to be the strongest demon king, was quite agitated. Enrith swung his staff and then, black flames started to pour down from the sky like rain. I am Enrith. No one is able to defeat me. Even if they pretend to be calm, a devil was still a devil. Their temperament when they got agitated or excited was pretty much alike. Myung looked at the black flames falling down from the sky. They fell down in a widespread area. It seemed like it was trying to wipe down everything and everyone. But that flame seemed to be disgusting to eat. So Myung said. He has always been at that place. One of the three chants Myung saw in ALS Nova. All the flames disappeared the moment those words came out of his mouth. So cleanly as if it didn't exist in the first place. Canceller. But how did he do it in that scale? Enrith got horrified. There were many methods to nullify spells, but all of them were small-ranged. It wasn't able to nullify a range this wide. Myung spread his wings. Then kicked the ground and flew in front of Enrith in an instant. Enrith's eyes shook. The existence that was in the beyond. He was standing right in front of him. He was sure of that. So it was you. It was you. He could feel a divinity. The divinity wasn't comparable to a demon god's, but it also couldn't be compared to a demon king's. A difference in levels. He couldn't be one of the four transcendent beings that are said to exist. Just where did such a monster come from? But I am Enrith. The true demon king that drives countless death and despair. Crack. Crack. Crackly. Lightning struck, and black lightning hit Myung. But, it tickled. Enrith had lost half of his magic power. He had used his magic power to protect himself from Bi Sungmin's self-destruction. It would have been difficult even if he was in his peak condition, but he couldn't inflict damage to Myung with half of his magic power. Lucifer's power was veracity incarnate. It had a tendency to ignore beings weaker than it. Not only that. The skin of the immortal was really sturdy and could eliminate a fair number of spells. So you could say that spells were useless in front of Myung. He was a natural enemy of magicians. Not yet. Enrith struggled. A black hand and tentacles covered Myung, but it couldn't touch him. This was the power of Gabriel. The power to not decay. That power got maximized and wouldn't permit such negative things to reach him easily. All his cards didn't work. Enrith flinched. What the hell are you? Just, how can such person that has all this power exist? Enrith also kind of grasped Muyong, but what remained was only despair. The several powers dwelling inside of Muyong. They weren't things one being could have it all. Muyong ignored all the spells Enrith used. As if he had invulnerability towards it. Enrith stepped back the moment Muyong approached him. And then Enrith hid himself in a black sphere. He had spread a black sphere that even stopped Bi Sungmin's self-destruction. A horn grew from Muyong's forehead. Shi-ying. He flew 64 times faster and slashed the black sphere. Crack. The sound it made when it broke was different. A power that was concentrated at one point wasn't something a mere barrier could block. Just how? Split? Both of his wings fell down. It can't be like this. How can this happen? To a guy I don't even know the identity of. You are the beginning. Enrith's body started to break down. He realized that he couldn't win against this opponent as a magician and was trying to erase his body. Maybe it was because he thought that Muyong learned a high-level undead magic. It seemed like he couldn't think of the humiliation turning into an undead would bring him, just like Sharshazar thought. But he has always been at that place. A chant of Als Nova. And this prayer nullified everything. Although it wasn't able to recover his body, it had the effect of cancelling a spell. Enrith's self-destruction stopped. Enrith was shocked. But he couldn't even scream this time. It was because of his surprise. He had never thought that Muyong would be able to stop his self-destruction. He could never imagine it. Muyong smirked and said, "You will become an undead. Become my sword and strike the demon gods." Enrith shook. And then Muyong extended his hand.